You know, hearing this sort of tableau from the beginning of Matthew here between Joseph and the angel, you can't help but have the feeling that the angel might be flat out wrong here. Heavenly home address notwithstanding, might have just completely missed this boat. I mean, look at who this angel has been sent to talk to. This is Joseph. He's a rough-handed carpenter from Palestine, and he has just watched all of his hopes and his dreams for the future fall to pieces in this very, very ordinary drama. This is neither the first time nor the last time that two teenagers have had to come together with fear and trembling and say, "Now what?" And you can hear that conversation. It says that Mary has been found with child. And so who found her? And how did Joseph find out? You can hear that conversation. "Joseph, I have something to tell you. I don't know. I didn't know really." And Joseph has a visitor. And this angel comes to him with a message. An angel from heaven comes to Joseph, who's just had all his hopes and dreams and this future he's created dashed to pieces, and says, "Joseph, son of David," it's always good to butter somebody up. I'm on board, okay? Butter him up. "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid, question mark, to take Mary as your wife." Don't you think the angel missed the boat here? Because I'm pretty sure that what is seething in Joseph's veins is not fear. What would Joseph be feeling? Well, make no mistake, he does do the kind thing. He's intending to do the kind thing. He's going to dismiss Mary quietly. That's the kind thing to do. But he's got to be furious, right? Hurt? Oh, yes. Angry? Oh, yes. And the angel, who maybe missed a couple classes on human emotions, comes and says, "Do not be afraid to take Mary as his wife." What would Joseph be afraid of? And I mean, we know fear. We are pros at fear in this day and age, aren't we? We get told to be afraid all the time. The 24-hour news cycle, it's on every screen. It's in our Insta, Faceta, Chatstagram feeds. It's constantly telling us, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Be afraid of Aleppo, Syria, which the UN Secretary General this week called a synonym for hell. Be afraid of those little girls who were killed in Pakistan for dancing this week, that we heard about this week. Be afraid of the genocide happening today in the South Sudan, and be afraid of the fact that we don't seem to care enough to do anything about it. Be afraid of those 4,812 migrants who have died in the Mediterranean just this year. Be afraid. We are told it constantly. We are the pros at fear. And what would Joseph have to be so afraid of? Why would the angel come with that kind of message? Do not be afraid. He could maybe be afraid of the Roman army, an occupying force that was on every corner, that had the right to make them do anything they wanted, and thought nothing of stringing people up on crosses along the sides of the road just to make a point. Oh, you could be afraid of them. Or be afraid of Herod, that puppet king in his castle, who thought nothing of slaughtering people that might pose a threat, including his own children and babies and newborns. You could be afraid of him, but that's not what the angel says, is it? It says, "Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife." Now, what would it mean for Joseph to take her as his wife? Well, appearing in public would get pretty humiliating, because in a village, everybody knows. And that humiliation in his day would have some economic consequences too, because as a carpenter, he's dependent on business, and people who would see him publicly shamed by this might not come as often, so business might go down. And you always had to haggle for prices in the market, so prices might go up. So there's an economic cost here. Joseph would lose something. Or picture maybe Joseph might have to, was worried about taking someone else's baby. Would he be able to love someone else's baby? Would he make a good father, and would he make especially an adoptive father? Maybe Joseph might be worried about that. Or maybe Joseph might be afraid and worried about the first time that he and Mary would be together when she has been with child. There's a cost here. There's a lot that Joseph has to lose if he takes Mary as his wife. And that fear of loss, that is the thing that is most often at the heart of our fears. Have you noticed that? Being afraid of losing something that we think is ours. That's the thing that makes us afraid of change and resist it. It's not that we're afraid of things changing. We're afraid that if things change, we're going to lose what we think we have. And the idea of reaching for something else doesn't get us past that thought that we're going to lose something. It's what makes us afraid of strangers. That this person we don't know might shake up our comfortable life the way it's been, and we might lose something. That's fear of loss. And that fear of loss is often at the heart of why we don't advocate for justice for other people. People that we know the system is not treating the way it's treating us, but we've been benefiting from that. And if we were to advocate for that, it's going to shake things up. And I'm pretty comfortable, and I might lose what I have now. That fear of loss is really powerful, isn't it? Being afraid of losing what we think is ours. That fear is at the heart of a lot of our fears. And for Joseph, that's a real fear. But the angel comes and says, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to do what God says is right. Do not be afraid to do what God indicates is his dream. And why? Because of a baby. This baby is God with us. That God has chosen to move into history with us. God has chosen to come alongside us and to be with us. This baby is Emmanuel, God in the midst of us. That God doing a new thing to never leave us on our own, but God moving in first. That there is no terror, no fear, no darkness, and no pain, that God not only will not be with us, but that God has already gone through, even death. That God will go through all of that for us and with us, that we are never on our own. Emmanuel, God with us through everything. How can we be afraid? And God with us sets us free. God with us sets us free to do what is right rather than what is expedient. God with us sets us free to advocate for others, for Jesus came to bring abundant life for all. God with us sets us free to be God's hands in the world in response to God's goodness and God's grace. God with us sets us free to be his people, serving his dream, anticipating the King who is to come. God with us banishes our fears, and we don't have to be controlled anymore. Brothers and sisters, we don't have to be afraid anymore. God is with us. Always. Why should we be afraid? God is with us. Do not be afraid, said the angel. Do not be afraid.